At the Magic Academy, elite snobs absolutely despise stealth operatives, especially the ones pulling up from the dirt-poor slums. So, the absolute second Van Kruger steps foot on campus, some stuck-up senior spellblader makes it her personal mission to check his ego. Our boy Van is literally just cruising down the corridor with his buddy minding. She simply cannot handle the disrespect. In a blink, cold steel is pinned right against his windpipe, and she is barking at him to kiss the ring. She demands he kneel like the filthy peasant she thinks he is. But Van, the dude does not even blink. He just stares her down and casually drops reality on her. They are all just classmates here, which means they are standing on level ground. Without skipping a beat, he clamps his bare hand around her razor-sharp blade, locking it down so hard she is completely paralyzed. Panic completely takes over her face. She is yanking and tugging with every ounce of mana she possesses. But Van effortlessly shatters her precious weapon right down the middle. Jagged metal rains across the polished floor, and the hallway goes dead silent. The realization finally hits her, she just poked a sleeping dragon. She chose the absolute worst target. So, who exactly is Van Kruger, and how is he this ridiculously overpowered on day one? Welcome to a twisted reality where mana-wielding elites endlessly abuse the magicless, spitting on them and labeling them as Garuda trash. The Sorcerer Empire brands it as natural balance, but let us be real. It is literally just weaponized discrimination on ultra-max settings. Things escalate so insanely fast that the second royal bearer starts scheming to enter our apex predator. Van is a phantom walking this earth, without a single drop of mana in his veins. Picture the ungodly lethal precision of John Wick, perfectly fused with the unmatched drippy aesthetic of Gojo Satoru. That is exactly who this guy is. Going head-to-head with a top-tier royal guard, our stealth god sleeps him instantly, with one devastating palm thrust straight up the nasal cavity, instantly short-circuiting the brainstem of his victim. A high-ranking, faced with an absolute unit like Van the elite spellcaster, gets folded just as effortlessly. One shattered jawbone later, and the dude is choking on his own teeth, completely stripped of his ability to chant a single incantation. And when that arrogant prince starts running his mouth about treating the Garuda like farm animals, Van completely skips the debate and just sends the royal brat straight to the afterlife. Mission accomplished, he regroups with Heinz, his absolute day one brother in this brutal war. These two have been grinding in the shadows for a solid decade, bleeding and sweating to carve out a utopia where powerless individuals are not constantly stepped on like bottom-tier garbage. And right now, with Heinz standing inches away from the crown, riding that victory high, Van treks back to his remote hometown, desperately craving a warm reunion with his mom and little sister, the only family he clings to through the worn-out pendant resting against his chest. But the second he arrives, the vibe is horrifyingly wrong. His childhood sanctuary is drowning in roaring infernos. Mutilated bodies are littered across the scorched earth, dumped exactly where they were viciously struck down. He forcefully gaslights himself into blaming random raiders. But as he scrambles through the wreckage, his family is nowhere in sight. Every drop of blood he spilled, every bone he broke, it was all to buy them a golden ticket out. And then his eyes lock onto a nightmare. His mother is suspended from a twisted branch completely devoid of life. In that exact fraction of a second, the entire universe just freezes. But before his brain can even digest the trauma, a fragile voice shatters the silence. It is Rena, his little sister, drenched in crimson and fighting just to stand. She frantically begs him to sprint away, warning him that the monsters are hunting him down. But out of absolutely nowhere, freezing steel brutally erupts right through his chest from behind. The armored grunts burst into twisted laughter, fully convinced they just permanently erased the realm's ultimate hazard. But even with a gaping hole in his torso, the heart rate of Van refuses to spike. A total stoic king. Drowning in absolute rage, he growls out the one question burning in his soul: exactly who ordered this massacre? The twisted truth literally shatters his reality. The mastermind is Heinz, his sworn brother, the exact same guy he literally just spoon-fed the crown. The traitor steps out from the shadows himself, looking completely unfazed. He spits that ghost-like assassins who can effortlessly drop elite casters are just way too dangerous to be kept breathing, claiming that fully erasing Van and the entire Garuda bloodline is the only way to genuinely secure his precious empire. Betrayed by his day-one homie over their shared lifelong dream, Van violently rejects the Reaper. He vows to drag Heinz straight down to the underworld with him, even if he has to burn his own soul to ash. Locking onto the backstabber, he aggressively overclocks his but Heinz fires back with a massive concentrated mana spear straight up, giving our boy the Toji Fushiguro treatment and blowing a massive crater right through his chest. Ultimately, the catastrophic bodily damage is just too much, and Van collapses hard into the dirt. Mocking Van for being too soft and letting his emotions become a weakness, the backstabbing king casually strolls away, abandoning his brother to slowly fade out alone. And as the final ticks of his lifespan slip away into the dark, a mysterious ethereal entity descends upon his fading vision. The supernatural beast extends a miraculous second chance at revenge. And just like that, when our guy snaps his eyes open, he is nowhere near that cursed battlefield. He is sitting right back in his childhood home, and standing perfectly alive, beaming at him, is Rena happily wishing her big brother a massive happy 15th birthday. That is when reality smacks him like a freight train. The Shadow Killer has officially rewound 10 years back. Van totally thinks he is stuck in some twisted fever dream, but the breeze blowing past him feels way too crisp. His past memories are crystal clear, and his lethal combat skills are still perfectly hardwired into his brain. Cut to somewhere else, a teenage spellcaster is tracking down a rogue extremist. The armored guards rolling with her are openly trash-talking the locals of the Garuda slums, casually treating them like absolute garbage. Back with Van, the dude is desperately wrapping his head around this insane redo, trying to figure out his next major play. Whenever a Garuda kid hits age 15, they face a massive crossroads. You either stick around for a dead-end grind bounce to do brutal manual labor, or sign up as a hired gun. Because the magicless guys pack insane Toji Fushiguro stats, they can definitely secure the bag as frontline scouts. But his mom is fiercely shutting that idea down. Looking back at his original timeline, that exact decision is the catalyst that made him cross paths with Heinz. Suddenly, a dark memory clicks in his head. He desperately pleads with his family to pack up and dip out of town immediately. Then he sprints off to track down the Purifiers, a radical cult universally recognized as absolute psychos. Their entire delusional mindset revolves around the Garuda being demon spawn who need to be erased from existence. And today is the exact date. Those scumbags triggered a massive bloodbath in the name of holy cleansing. But this time around, Van is done playing the victim. He instantly locks on to his first prey. The absolute cheat code to clapping a spellcaster is completely outspeeding their reaction time and shattering their brain or spine before they even blink. Van lunges forward, violently, drops his first target, and makes sure everyone knows exactly who is hunting them. He effortlessly dances around the next attacker, snatching their glowing magical blade, to completely shatter the enemy's energy shield. Another fanatic blasts a hex his way, but Van totally blitzes the gap before the attack even connects, ramming a brutal strike straight into the dude's stomach. Only 3 enemies are left standing now. Just as he is about to finish wiping the floor with them, a cultist snatches an innocent bystander, screaming at him to back off, or the lady gets clipped. Van instantly realizes he screwed up. He totally forgot to scan the perimeter. Even knowing that giving up is practically a death sentence, he is completely cornered. Van slowly raises his hands into the air, immediately getting slammed hard into the dirt. The entire squad starts jumping him all at once, mercilessly kicking him into the pavement without holding back. One of the psychos screams that they need to finish the job right now, fully convinced this kid is the Grim Reaper himself, and keeping him breathing is just asking for terrible karma. But right before they can pull the trigger, a teenage girl swoops in to save the day. The spellcaster drops a massive frost hex, instantly locking the fanatics in solid ice, and boldly slapping them with an arrest warrant on the spot. Van is completely mind-blown. Back in his original run, it took way longer for the cavalry to actually show up. The girl and her unit quickly bag the cultists, but her eyes immediately lock onto Van, the absolute menace, who just soloed 3 grown men with 0 magic. Thoroughly hyped up, she reveals that one of his victims literally had the firepower to nuke the entire block in ashes. She was fully planning to tiptoe around that guy to avoid civilian casualties, but Van just flat out deleted him from the server. Helene catches his name. Visibly fascinated by this kid, she casually drops the idea that he should totally enroll in the magical academy. Countless elite legends and top-tier casters have graduated from that place. Yet Van is completely baffled as to why she is scouting him of all people. The duo walks into a creepy abandoned area where the mage suddenly turns totally hostile, threatening to end his life. Out of nowhere, she sparks up her mana and launches a frozen projectile directly at his face, but she is left entirely shook. He vanished into thin air, and he did not even use a single skill to do it. In a split second, he spawns right behind her, chilling perfectly in her absolute blind spot, totally primed for a lethal takedown. Milliseconds before delivering the fatal strike, Van pauses and bluntly calls out her trash acting, noticing she had absolutely 0 killer instinct. The spellcaster is low-key mind-blown, realizing this teenager already gives off the terrifying aura of an absolute veteran. It is completely wild to her that he can effortlessly throw hands with magic users, relying strictly on pure physical stats. Helene then throws out a crazy concept. The entire destiny of the Garuda slums could flip upside down if Van actually enrolls. She hints at the Royal Knight Validation loophole, a program that hands out massive perks to students with top-tier performance. Using that system, even random nobodies can legally level up to aristocracy, meaning this kid could literally carry his whole neighborhood out of the gutter. Highly suspicious, the boy drops 3 heavy questions. Number 1, he literally needs a VIP ticket from a noble to enter. Helene immediately slaps down an offer to forge him a glowing letter. Number 2, how does a guy with a 0-mana pool even survive in a caster school? Helene admits it sounds insane, but reveals that plenty of dudes who actually secured knighthood did it by cracking new magical theories instead of just flexing raw spells. From brewing crazy elixirs to fully decoding complex arcane geometry, she promises that the craft is way deeper than just shooting fireballs. A crazy heavy burden is now resting squarely on his shoulders, pushing him to point out the ultimate red flag. What exactly is Helene's payout for pushing a street kid into high society? Helene gives him a smirk, making it painfully obvious she has a hidden agenda. But before Van can interrogate her any further, she completely shuts down the conversation. His sister bursts onto the scene totally freaked out after catching wind of his insane brawl with those lethal thugs. Meanwhile, Helene drops the ultimate motivation, swearing on her prestigious Steiner family name to keep his people safe if he joins their cause. Fast forward a few days, his mom is still super anxious about the bloodshed, but our guy spills the tea about the academy and the crazy perks waiting for him there. Rena and his mom absolutely panic. They know damn well that elite school is strictly reserved for high-tier magic users. But Van smoothly calms their nerves, swearing to prove they are far from trash. His shady past as a hitman just does not vibe with this new destiny. Plus, he knows he cannot solo this journey. Helene's massive flex of an offer just unlocked a completely different timeline for him. Since he literally already died once, Van refuses to fumble even the tiniest glimmer of hope. He boldly vows to wipe out every ounce of toxic prejudice the Garuda suffer in this empire. His fiery speech echoes the exact same unbreakable will his dad used to have. Knowing her son is stubbornly locked in, his mom tearfully gives him the green light to chase his destiny. There is just one massive roadblock: the insane tuition costs, which are straight up ridiculous in this garbage economy. But right when things look utterly hopeless, Helene clutches up, dropping a fat stack of bounty cash for his mission, Carrie entirely fixing his money glitch before he even packs his bags. Begging him not to let this brutal world turn his heart cold, his mom bids him an emotional farewell. Van hugs his family goodbye and hits the road heavily, carrying their dreams on his shoulders. In a flash, he pulls up to the jaw-dropping gates of the Magic Academy. And guys, this is exactly where the absolute peak fiction kicks off. Our boy is utterly stunned, completely blown away by the courtyard is buzzing with hyped-up students. One cocky candidate loudly flexes his title, introducing himself as Alexis von Hohenberg from the elite Hohenberg clan. The security guards instantly start glazing the rich kid, bowing like crazy. Right next to him stands a girl backed by the Duchess of Krausenberg, another insanely wealthy VI. Van casually steps forward to submit his application, only to get violently barked at out of nowhere. Spotting his striking crimson eyes, the spoiled rich kids instantly label him as a filthy bottom-tier Garuda. The disrespect is brutal, and it is literally just the warm-up. Keeping his cool, our guy calmly tells the aggro guards that he is not here to start beef, and just wants to hand in his paperwork. But the raging guard ruthlessly clowns on him, acting like Van is too stupid to even know what zip code he is standing in. Van claps back, spitting straight facts that the Royal Academy legally allows literally anyone to take the entrance exam, totally ignoring social class. Completely losing his mind over a basic logic check, the guard shoves a razor-sharp spear right into Van's face, aggressively blocking a Garuda from even stepping foot near the test zone. Van internally sighs at how fast this whole situation went completely off the rails. He knows he could easily fold this rent-a-cop in 2 seconds. But throwing hands in front of this massive crowd would instantly ruin his low-key reputation. Luckily, the slightly less insane guard steps in, trying to stop his partner from throwing. Van actually feels a bit relieved, thinking somebody has a working brain cell, but that tiny sliver of hope is instantly crushed. The exact same dudes who were just licking the boots of those rich kids now glare at our boy with pure disgust, labeling him just another delusional beggar. Van realizes he really needs to adapt to this toxic double standard, and fast. The guard smugly repeats that the school technically does not discriminate against anyone. However, there is a massive catch. To even breathe the same air as the examiners, you absolutely need a golden ticket, a formal recommendation from a high-ranking noble. The guard smirks, fully expecting the broke kid to pack up and cry, but Van casually drops a bomb. He whips out a pristine envelope stamped with an authentic noble wax seal, leaving the guy utterly speechless. The exact millisecond the guard recognizes the legendary Steiner crest, he completely loses his mind, screaming at Van and accusing the street rat of forging elite documents. In his tiny brain, there is zero chance a prestigious lord would ever waste their ink on some magicless nobody. So, he aggressively snatches the letter, ready to hit Van with a totally fake felony charge. But our boy is absolutely not letting that slide. Van instantly yanks the dude's arm backwards, slamming him face first into the dirt with a brutal bone-rattling crash. His partner stands there completely frozen, while the surrounding snobby candidates gasp in sheer panic. Neither of these rent-a-cops can wrap their heads around a zero-mana kid flawlessly dropping a grown warrior. They frantically try to cope, calling it a lucky trip. Out of nowhere, a high-ranking official strolls up to investigate the chaos, prompting both humiliated guards to aggressively bow and beg for forgiveness. Sweating bullets, they snitch that a lowly Garuda is trying to sneak into the exams. The official slowly turns his gaze to the boy, demanding his identity. Van totally owns the moment, loudly declaring himself as the personal candidate of Lady Helene Steiner, a heavy-hitting name that instantly sends a shockwave through the crowd. The examiner snatches the envelope, zooming in on the details, and firmly validates that both the ink and the wax seal are 100% authentic Steiner property. His entire vibe instantly flips. He actually bows respectfully to the kid, quickly rolling out the red carpet for him to enter. Because, let us be real, the Steiner bloodline does not play around. Just like that, all eyes are glued to Van. Every single rich kid is whispering, completely baffled as to how a street kid bagged such an insane power-up. Our guy feels super awkward under the spotlight, quietly realizing that Helene must literally be top-tier nobility. Stepping through the massive doors, Van scans the grand hall, quickly noticing that every single competitor here is radiating absolute elite energy. He immediately spots Dietrich, the absolute unit destined to become the legendary Blade Master, and right nearby, the future Grand Mage of Flames, Shale, chilling alongside Lunaris, a blonde chick who eventually transforms into the legendary Maiden of Might. Literally every single heavy hitter from his past life apparently got their start at this very academy. Looking back, Van was nothing but a cold-blooded killer in the shadows. A ghost who never got to share the spotlight with the so-called heroes clashing on the battlefield. But plot twist. The second the throne sparked a massive power struggle, every single one of them sold out to the corrupt princes. And our boy. He had to slaughter them all. Talk about maxing out his aura points. Bro is literally making eye contact with his future body count. But now that he is officially enrolled, he has got to flex on them in broad daylight. It is going to be a massive grind. But Van is ready to sweat blood, flip the script, and completely overhaul this corrupt kingdom from the inside out. Right in the middle of his epic main character monologue, some random snob barks at him, totally trashing him just for chilling there. Confused, Van fires back that he can stand literally wherever he pleases. And honestly, it is hilarious. This absolute clown thinks our guy is the one catching an attitude. He instantly launches into a whole 5-page essay about his elite bloodline. Van has dealt with this exact garbage a million times in his past life. He figures playing dumb and bowing out might be the ultimate hack. Then his mom's gentle voice echoes in his head, warning him not to let this toxic world poison his soul. Even back in the day, Heinz dropped the exact same truth bomb. Bending the knee to your haters will not ever earn you an ounce of respect. He begged him to walk with his head held high. But the yapping kid in front of him right now, just a reckless brat who actually dares to lay hands on Van. Yeah, Mr. Nice Guy has officially left the chat. Van coldly reminds the punk that he dragged him into this mess. And before little bro can even process what is happening, Van snatches both of his wrists, violently forcing the kid straight down to his knees. It is a crazy move called Spellveg, the sick ability to entirely absorb an enemy's sheer force, perfectly sync it with your own, and completely hijack their bodily movements. Fun fact, that is the exact same counterattack he pulled on that guard earlier. Now that the arrogant noble is pinned down, like an obedient dog, Van casually offers him a hand, skyrocketing the humiliation factor. But apparently, this kid is so salty that he straight up charges a magic spell on the spot. But a single booming voice instantly paralyzes the entire brawl. Everyone completely freezes. Prince Heinz just pulled up to the scene. He swiftly reminds the crowd that the Garuda are untouchable allies of the kingdom. The brat frantically stutters out an apology. Heinz, dripping with absolute humility, claims he is just another basic examinee, exactly like the rest of them, begging them to drop the formalities. He smoothly offers that same chill vibe to Van, but our boy is utterly short-circuiting over the fact that this royal casually turns out to be another future academy grad. The sheer presence of the 9th prince leaves the crowd absolutely shook. Nobody ever expected a literal prince to sweat through an entrance exam with the commoners. But what triggers them the most is watching royalty act all buddy-buddy with a supposed lowly Garuda, shooting Van's street cred straight through the roof. Meanwhile, our boy is getting massive flashbacks to their old chats. He remembers Hines casually flexing about studying at an academy way back in the day. Suddenly, that memory hits totally different. The current prince assumes Van is totally starstruck, humbly admitting that he is also low-key stressing out, since this exam's cutoff rate is notoriously brutal. Reaching out for a handshake, Hines warmly insists that there is zero reason to panic, promising they will all just crush it together. Van glares at that bright smile with hardcore suspicion. He knows exactly how this prince brainwashes the masses with that insanely charismatic grin. But Van has already seen the monster hiding behind the mask, fully aware that a twisted conspiracy is brewing behind those gentle eyes. A dark urge briefly hijacks Van's mind. Slice the prince's throat wide open right here, right now. But catching a body today would instantly nuke his entire revenge arc. Swallowing the raging hatred for the absolute demon who butchered his family, Van forces his boiling blood to chill. Catching that look of pure disgust totally scrambles Hines' brain, leaving him completely baffled. But our guy completely curbs him, turning his back without a single word. Refusing to make any royal beasties, Van just leaves the prince in the dust, fully embracing his dark lone wolf era with a totally desolate expression. The snobby elites are absolutely gasping for air, doubling down on their toxic belief that magicless folks are just wild animals. Suddenly, a massive voice rips through the chaos, commanding total silence. The head examiner has officially hit the stage to lock down the registration period for good. Now, this fresh meat is getting shipped straight to the actual battleground, a terrifying zone dubbed the Forest of Shadows. And honestly, the spooky aesthetic totally hooks Van's interest. Cutting to the very next shot, the entire Proctor squad is posted up right outside the drop zone. The big boss grabs the spotlight, welcoming these rookies to the twisted woods that will serve as their ultimate torture chamber for the first-year exam. As everybody already knows, this academy is notoriously famous for forging absolute beasts who will carry the kingdom's destiny on their backs. Basically, the academy is trying to weed out the absolute scrubs. This opening trial completely relies on a rookie's raw magical potential. Plus, the ominous Forest of Shadows is literally overflowing with mana, hiding a very specific bloom deep inside its terrifying woods. Everyone's mission: snag 10 of these rare blossoms. But standing right in their way are ravenous mana-infused predators lurking in the shadows, making this an absolute nightmare. Now our guy knew the trial would be brutal, but throwing down with savage monsters straight out of the gate was wild. Oh, and sabotaging other competitors is strictly banned. Teaming up, however, is totally fair game. Here's the catch, though: to actually pass, every single recruit must secure their own stash of 10 flowers. The head proctor even warns that squatting up into massive groups could completely backfire on them. They've got until the sun drops to finish the hustle. Finally, a proctor steps up, handing out survival badges to everyone. If things get too dicey, crushing it drops a rescue signal for an instant extraction. But shattering that lifeline means you are instantly kicked out of the academy. The trial kicks off immediately. They plunge into the cursed woods ready to grind. Some of these try-hard rich kids are already out here, networking and building alliances, while others are just linking up with their childhood bros. This leaves our boy completely solo, with zero backup. Honestly though, that's a massive flex because Van wanted to fly solo anyway. He strides up to grab his safety tag, catching a downright venomous glare from the head official. The guy shoves the badge into his hand, allowing Van to cross the tree line into the abyss. There's also some random dude creeping right behind him. Regardless, Van isn't flinching. He wants all the smoke immediately. He steps straight up to a predator radiating some heavy magic energy. Basically, animals hopped up on mana are labeled magic beasts. Their physical stats completely obliterate a normal humans, making them way more obnoxious to deal with than any mortal target. The monstrosity lunges at our protagonist, sparking a flashback. Ever since he embraced the assassin life, his prey was strictly human, meaning he hasn't thrown hands with a wild monster in ages. As for this snarling threat flying through the air, I can't believe I'm saying this, but our stealthy assassin literally decks it in the face like a heavy brawler, all thanks to some monster-slaying martial arts he just happens to have in the bag. Honestly, it's giving major Sukuna Heian era energy, pulling forbidden techniques out of thin air. Anyway, this specific combat art channels all of your momentum into one, a devastating concentrated blow. The raw kinetic force alone tears right through a monster's internal defenses. Normally, landing this hit is near impossible, but against beasts running purely on savage instinct, it's the ultimate cheat code for a clean one-shot. The creature drops dead, collapsing at Van's feet. Van reminisces about his brutal training days, where he was forced to brawl with monstrous predators to master these exact lethal strikes. Oh, and he totally senses his stalker peeping from the shadows. He just acts completely oblivious and keeps trekking forward. The creeps turn out to be two arrogant snobs absolutely shook by what they just witnessed. Utterly refusing to accept that he folded the monster with pure muscle, they cope by assuming he used poison, some lame trick they think they're immune to. One of the guys points out the strict no sabotage rule. But let's be real, these snobs are convinced the warning is totally fake. Because nobody at this preppy school wants to see a lowly Garuda actually graduate. Plus, Van publicly roasted the prince earlier, so this delusional clown really thinks he can murder him and dodge all the heat. Bro is rocking the ego of Light Yagami, but the actual IQ of Yamcha. Meanwhile, cutting to the very next scene, the head official is being escorted down to a massive reinforced dungeon. He barks for the keys while the nervous guards hesitate, questioning if this is a massive mistake. Brushing them off, the corrupt official claims the beast is perfectly brainwashed. His twisted plan: program the monster to brutally shred the kid who crashed their exclusive exam. After all, the whole faculty secretly wants the Garuda boy dead. They couldn't reject a royal recommendation, but if a so-called peasant actually aces the trial, it would completely shatter the Academy's elite reputation. Gaslighting himself that Garudas are destined to die anyway, the scumbag fully commits to his murder plot. Even so, the panicked guard argues that releasing a Titan could easily slaughter the other innocent students. But the unhinged proctor waves it off. He already tracked Van wandering deep into the woods, completely isolated, meaning zero collateral damage. Snatching the key, he throws the massive iron gates wide open, ordering the abomination to hunt down the filthy Garuda and protect their pristine legacy. The camera then pivots to the purple-haired examiner, the only guy actually catching on to the fact that this year's trial is seriously rigged. The corrupt head proctor casually strolls back into the command center, asking for sit-reps. While the younger examiner claims everything is running smoothly, he casually probes about where his boss just vanished to, and the villain plays it cool, claiming he was just setting up some final test preparations. But that sinister micro-smirk on his face gives him away instantly. The younger guy immediately clocks the vibe, knowing something incredibly messed up is about to go down. Shifting focus back to Van, our guy navigates deep into the heart of the woods, spotting the exact flora from his mission briefing. Boom, he's found the breathtaking heaven's tear blossoms. It's supposed to be a simple snatch and grab, then head straight back. But before his fingers even graze the petals, he loudly commands the creeping shadows trailing him to quit hiding and show their faces. A pair of arrogant brats step out, genuinely shook that he tracked their stealthy approach, instantly roasting Van for having the heightened senses of a stray mutt. Totally unfazed by the cheap trash talk, our boy claps back, stating he's simply accustomed to spineless losers trying to sneak up on him. The irony hits him a second later. Bro literally stalks targets from the shadows for a living as an elite assassin. Meanwhile, the two snobs sneer, declaring a filthy commoner like him, and they're ready to physically enforce that twisted hierarchy. But Van completely shatters their pathetic excuse, exposing the raw truth: these privileged clowns are just insanely salty and desperate to avenge their bruised friend. Dropping into a flawless combat stance, my absolute goat promises to literally beat that arrogant complex right out of their skulls. Triggered beyond belief, both students channel volatile mana, sparking up lethal spells to obliterate him. Scanning the battlefield, Van instantly categorizes the dual threat: one pure spellcaster and one enchanted swordsman. He rapidly calculates his counter strategy, mentally breaking down the three fundamental branches of magical combat. Category 1 features your standard backline spell-slinging wizards. Category 2 focuses on channeling raw magical energy into steel weaponry, widely recognized as blade mages. And the final tier relies entirely on explosive physical enhancement, earning them the brutal title of Mana Brawlers. Running a duo with contrasting combat classes is a massive tactical advantage, perfectly covering each other's blind spots. Glancing at the trembling gaze of the swordsman, Van immediately detects their total lack of actual bloodshed. These kids have never taken a life, yet they're actively hunting for his throat. Van has zero desire to catch a murder charge today, but the grim reality remains: if a slum-dwelling Garuda perishes, the world wouldn't blink, and the Academy higher-ups would instantly sweep it under the rug as a tragic training mishap. On the flip side, flatlining a highborn heir, that aristocratic family would mobilize their entire private military to hunt down the culprit, potentially wiping the entire Garuda sector off the map in a blind rage. This kingdom's elite class is an absolute nightmare to cross. They conquered their vast territories through sheer brutal warfare, meaning they thrive on spilling blood. However, our protagonist refuses to slide back into his old murderous habits this time around. desperately clinging to his new life in the light. Because of that vow, he completely seals away his lethal assassination arts, opting instead to shatter their inflated egos and force a humiliating submission. His icy composed glare deeply triggers the noble brats, especially the bowl-cut kid who violently unleashes his signature Zerwinda incantation, blasting razor-sharp wind currents straight at our boy. Van swiftly dodges the main impact, though a stray breeze leaves a shallow scratch across his skin. The privileged snob mockingly applauds his reaction time, bragging that the invisible strike was meant to decapitate him. Honestly, our guy is completely unimpressed by the gust of wind, while this yapping aristocrat launches into a 12-page podcast about his bloodline's legendary unseeable slashing magic. Basically think of it like Sukuna's terrifying cleave and dismantle deadly rapid-fire strikes that the human eye literally cannot track. Prematurely claiming a flawless victory, the brat violently demands the slum dweller hit the dirt and beg for mercy. But Van just casually yawns, calling his ultimate move a pathetic, refreshing summer breeze. He sarcastically questions if the mighty House Valtre runs a luxury air conditioning business, which honestly is an absolutely lethal career-ending roast. Bro emotionally devastated this kid way harder than the magic ever could, sending the noble into a screaming frenzy as he activates a catastrophic tear spell, the Zerwinda Tempest. This upgraded storm boasts a massive area of effect, violently shredding the surrounding trees into sawdust. Yet Van remains insanely agile, weaving through the invisible vortex of blades like an absolute phantom. Don't get it twisted, he doesn't suddenly possess magical X-ray vision. Nah, his battle-hardened instincts just perfectly track the enemy's raw, leaking bloodlust, allowing him to predict every single trajectory. Closing the gap in a heartbeat, Van buries a devastating bone-rattling hook deep into the caster's stomach, serving up a brutal reality check that'll sting for weeks. With the wizard snoozing in the dirt, his magic swordsman buddy desperately tries to maintain his tough guy persona. He recklessly sprints right at our protagonist. Van instantly locks onto his grip and footwork, effortlessly downloading his entire combat rhythm in a fraction of a second. Because at the end of the day, as long as he dodges the glowing steel, it's no different from a regular street fight weapon. Granted, dodging an enchanted blade is far from a walk in the park, especially when the razor-sharp tip slashes through the air insanely faster than a bare-fisted strike. However, our guy is completely dialed in with superhuman reflexes, executing a blindingly fast-forward dash to tightly clamp down on the attackers. Smoothly shifting the momentum, he aggressively twists the arm, completely breaking the swordsman's posture before slamming a surgically precise strike to the neck, instantly shutting him down. The wobbly student somehow struggles back to his feet. Van coldly glares him down, daring him to swing one more time, promising that if he does, the training wheels come completely off. Terrified, the defeated noble immediately throws his hands into the air, frantically pleading to just end the slaughter. But mid-surrender, a massive spine-chilling aura suddenly floods the forest. Every single alarm bell in Van's head starts screaming that something is horribly wrong. Dropping the rivalry, he urgently barks at the bruised snobs to run for their absolute lives. Suddenly, a beast dripping in crimson spawns right in front of them, radiating an aura so terrifying, it completely freezes the crew in their tracks. With one brutal swipe, this absolute unit sends all three of them flying through the air before they slam hard into the dirt. Van is barely computing what just went down. His eyes go wide with pure shock as this infernal boar gears up for round 2. This is a top-tier threat that has absolutely zero business roaming this forest, and the massive creature is ready to flatten them all over again. These demonic pigs are notorious as the Cursed Fangs. Their mana-infused charges literally hit like heavy artillery magic. Basically take a couple of hits, and it is an instant game over. Van realizes the stakes are way too high, and yells at the other two to make a break for it. One kid is totally on board with the escape plan, but the curly-haired dude straight up refuses to budge completely, throwing our boy off. And nah, it is not because this guy is trying to play the hero. His ankle got completely wrecked during that first massive impact, so he can barely even stand up. Van gets way too completely ignoring the massive beast barreling straight toward his face. The whole situation just got incredibly complicated, because carrying the guy means dipping out is no longer an option. The Doombringer would easily close the gap, especially since these things are notoriously relentless when chasing marked targets. Plan B would be to shatter their emergency badge and summon an examiner, but backup is going to take way too long to show up. The dude with the busted ankle figures he is dead weight right now, so he begs his buddy to save himself. Clinging to his massive ego to the bitter end as a proud member of the Valtrate clan, the kid declares he will solo this menace, but his homie absolutely refuses to leave his bro behind, convinced that bailing would just completely drag his own noble family's name through the mud. While these Nepo babies are having a dramatic brotherhood moment, Van is just cringing in the background. Regardless, he barks at them to snap the token. He promises to pull the monster's aggro in the meantime, but one of the rich kids absolutely dreads failing and bringing that kind of shame upon his bloodline. Honestly, both of these snobs share that exact same mindset, and instead of safely tapping out, they would rather fade out swinging with their spells. Yeah, these clowns and their discount Vegeta-level ego trips are giving Van a massive headache. He finally snaps back yelling that if they are going to stay in the ring, they better fight to secure the W because surviving is the ultimate flex of true noble honor. But instead of getting the memo, these guys just keep throwing that derogatory guru. Honestly though, this infernal beast is being insanely patient, just standing there, letting them finish their entire monologue. But reality snaps back as the creature is now a hair's breadth from bulldozing them. Meanwhile, the shady supervisor is just vibing off screen, knowing the main event is finally about to drop. Catching on to his creepy muttering, the lead examiner demands to know what the heck he means by that. The creepy dude completely dodges the question, smoothly shifting the topic by asking if anyone has popped a distress signal yet, but the tracker is completely silent. Radio silence across the board. This just fuels his twisted joy, utterly convinced that the Garuda kid got absolutely flattened before. He could even hit the panic button. Here is the massive twist. All the rookies had their personal gear magically confiscated. The second the trial started, all this corrupt official had to do was snag Van's backpack and dangle it right under the snout of that demonic pig, basically programming the beast to lock on to his unique aura. After rigging the game that badly, he is certain it is curtains for our boy, and now he is just waiting to stamp the casualty paperwork. Bro is literally smirking to himself, acting like he is playing 4D chess out here, like some anime mastermind. While the head examiner is still trying to figure out what on earth this guy is scheming, we cut straight back to the chaos with the Doombringer. The Alpha Predator is just winding up its devastating rush. All three rookies are braced for impact, with Van rapidly cooking up a battle plan. He volunteers to pull the initial aggro so the duo can follow up with massive damage. But these stubborn elite kids absolutely refuse to take directions from a commoner. Well, they better get with the program quick, because the giant beast is shifting into overdrive. Spotting a tiny microsecond of vulnerability, Van blitzes forward with insane speed, locking onto the beast's critical weak point, and unleashes a collapse strike that completely breaks its super armor. The impact is so ridiculously heavy that it leaves the arrogant nobles completely speechless. Attribution is this high-tier technique where you read the exact muscle twitch that telegraphs an enemy's next move. Simply put, when a four-legged tank like this boar shifts its weight, the head always moves first. Van totally exploited that split-second habit, delivering a flawless piercing blow during that exact window. But sadly, it is not an instant KO lacking the raw firepower to actually eliminate the beast. Sure, his brain remembers every elite martial arts combo, but the 10 years of insane muscle mass and stamina he grinded for has been completely wiped out. This huge nerf makes it basically impossible for him to one-shot boss-level monsters anymore. Pivoting strategies, he screams at his temporary squad to unleash hell, prompting the wind magic dude to absolutely spam his arrow blades. His buddy instantly matches the energy, charging up his magical blade to try and carve right through the monster's incredibly thick armor. But his blade literally bounces right off. It's like slashing a titanium boulder. Their entire combo does 0 damage, only managing to totally piss off this magical tank. Predicting the absolute chaos coming next, Van screams for everyone to hit the dirt. This massive porker is revving up to completely flatten everything in its path. By some miracle, our guy dodges the stampede. The whole squad actually evades a direct impact, even those stuck-up rich kids. Van breathes a heavy sigh of relief just seeing them breathing. One of the elite snobs suddenly pipes up, flexing that he clutched up by manipulating the wind currents to shove the hellbore off course. Honestly, that split-second maneuver was the only thing stopping them from getting totally wiped out. Meanwhile, our magic swordsman is practically frozen, offering absolutely nothing. Still, Van refuses to let them throw in the towel, hyping them up for one final desperate push. It sounds like pure madness, but our boy locks in, swearing that with this next strike, he's packing this oversized baconator straight to the afterlife. The Valtryek heir looks at him like he's utterly delusional. I mean, they couldn't even scratch the beast's magical armor. On their first try, handing out some pro-tier combat advice, Van barks at him to grab nearby rocks, to supercharge his current spell's impact. Wide slashes are basically useless here, but pinpoint piercing damage, that just might shatter its defenses. Taking the cue, the elite questions Van's endgame, because, let's be real, glancing at this nightmare, they are hopelessly outmatched, even if they dumped all 3 of their ultimate moves together. The rich kid naturally assumes he's being set up as live bait. He figures Van is only pushing for round 2 just to buy enough time to save his own skin. In his twisted mind, ditching the kid with the busted leg is just common sense. But our absolute king radiates massive main character aura. The kid fiercely declares that his ultimate ambition is to elevate his family and force this kingdom to finally treat the Garuda tribe as true equals. To chase a dream that massive, there is absolutely zero chance he's going to bail on his squad and run away like a coward. Hearing that raw conviction while Van literally shields them hits the trashy noble right in the feelings. Memories of bullying this legend flood back, leaving him entirely sickened by his own past garbage behavior. Whipping back to our demonic porker, this monstrosity is already revving up for round 3. Van screams at the top of his lungs, commanding the squad to unleash their magic. The beast barrels toward them at supersonic speeds. Firing back, the wind magic user drops his blade dance, manipulating the gales to snatch up jagged fragments. He unleashes the black dust sky, rend a savage cyclone that aggressively slings razor-sharp debris straight into the monster's face. The elite tier creature is visibly flinching, finally taking actual damage. Staggered by the onslaught, it leaves a split-second window for our boy to slide right into the danger zone. Van launches himself airborne, targeting the monster's massive skull and grappling it tight. You see, unlike us humans, four-legged creatures lack a solid collarbone connecting their shoulders to their spine. Sure, this gives them crazy agility and wild front leg mobility, but it leaves them extremely vulnerable to blunt sideways force. Exploiting this, Van drops his Gookie combo, move number 10, aggressively slamming the Titan face first into the dirt. Without skipping a beat, he barks at the Spellblade kid to strike, now aiming for the vital core buried right at the base of its neck. The magic wielder is practically seconds away from his ultimate highlight reel, but he suddenly freezes paralyzed as the towering beast glares daggers right into his soul. Pushing through the sheer terror, he goes all in, driving his glowing blade deep for the finishing strike. Van and the rich kid start popping off as the magical weapon sinks deep into the Hellbringer's thick hide, piercing straight toward its vitals. It looks like a totally confirmed takedown until this absolute unit randomly triggers a desperate 0-hour ability. A massive shockwave violently launches the whole squad backward. This insane trick is known as Curse Break, a wildly rare overpowered skill that only a handful of The Hellbore unleashes an ear-piercing shriek coated in raw mana, triggering a devastating explosion that absolutely nukes the entire radius. The Spellblade kid violently coughs up crimson. The intense kinetic pressure practically scrambled his insides, leaving him with critical internal damage. Flipping the script, the Hellbore snatches back the momentum, completely dominating the battlefield. As the injured boy stares in pure horror, basically accepting that he's completely cooked. Suddenly, Ben instantly slides up to the front line. He tanks the entire brutal weight of the monster's charge, with his own physical body deploying a fusion counter known as the Lance Spirale. This heavy-duty move channels the monster's kinetic momentum directly into the earth, dispersing the shockwaves in a spiral around him. Totally baffled and raging, the giant beast aggressively ramps up its horsepower, generating so much pressure that Van's deflection stance completely buckles. Pushed right to the brink, our protagonist debates unleashing his hidden ultimate. Sure, ripping off the limiter might literally break his bones, but it's their one and only ticket to surviving this nightmare. Barking orders, he commands the noble to scramble out of there, and the terrified teen instantly sprints away from the chaotic zone. Now fully isolated in a one-on-one showdown, Van strains every muscle to hold the line. But the overpowered monster aggressively launches him through the air, violently slamming him against a massive tree trunk. The injured comrade desperately limps forward to back him up, but our absolute legend commands him to stay out of the crossfire. Meanwhile, the demonic beast revs up its engine, charging in to finish Van off for good. He's flat on his back, the air thick with tension. Honestly, it looks like game over. Out of nowhere, the ex-assassin drops a chilling battle cry, shattering his limits and going absolutely feral. Suddenly, a high-speed projectile blasts the creature, sending it crashing sideways. Magic. Van recognizes the spell instantly and locks eyes with the caster. Plot twist, it's freaking Heinz. The prince actually showed up to play hero. His royal fan club swarms him, begging him to evacuate immediately. But Heinz shuts them down, spouting some noble garbage about a royal's duty to protect the people. The elite squad eats it up, hype levels rising. But our boy Van He knows it's pure cap. Heinz loves pulling this inspirational stunt to brainwash folks right before throwing them in. The prince plays besties with the nobles, delusional enough to think the power of friendship will slay this monstrosity. Van hits his breaking point and shuts that circus down with a massive deadpan no. Shocked, Heinz demands to know what his problem is. Van doubles down, hard pass on any royal handouts. The snobs immediately start barking at Van for disrespecting his highness, crying about how Heinz literally just saved their skins. Van ain't having it. He claps back, stating he would have butchered the beast himself if Captain Royal hadn't killed his vibe. To them, he sounds wildly toxic, major sore loser energy, like a salty gamer raging after fumbling a clutch. Heinz just watches as Van steps up to the Hellboar solo. Our absolute madman even tells the prince to grab some popcorn, he's solo carrying this raid. The demon pig goes 0 to 100 charging again. Ralph gets thirsty for one last clean strike, but Van instantly benches him. Because rushing in right now, that's a guaranteed death sentence. Even the Voltrike prodigy is literally one tap away from getting wiped. Everyone's clinging to 1 HP. Van barks at them to hold position and wait for his ping. Heinz gets a little ticked off, but stays glued to the action. The timer's up. Van drops the signal to execute this beast. He hard engages first, diving straight into the monster's line of sight. Earlier, he let his rage take the wheel. Not this time. He shelves his ultimate move and approaches the brawl with pure cold strategy. The Hellboar blitzes him exactly like before, but our boy flawlessly parries with a devastating explosive uppercut. After whiffing 3 heavy rushes, the beast finally clocks that these humans aren't just low-level fodder. It starts holding back, throwing calculated, cautious strikes. Sniffing out a fake-out, Van fluidly pivots into action. A smirk hits his face. He can effortlessly deflect the blows now that the beast is playing it safe. Furious, the Hellboar roars, whipping its massive tusks to impale him. But Van's movement is terrifyingly smooth, slipping through every fatal swipe by mere inches. Heinz and his royal posse are absolutely gagged. How the hell is he moving at warp speed with 0 mana buffs? Boom! Van rocks the Hellboar with another punishing blow, flawlessly shifting his center of gravity to maximize damage. His form is so god-tier, Heinz has only witnessed that level of cracked mechanics from Grandmaster Mage. The brawl drags on, but Van is literally playing with his food now. He spams brutal strikes, relentlessly hammering the skull, yet none of the hits pack enough punch to actually flatline the tank. Makes sense, he's running this fight entirely on base stats, without a single magical DPS buff to shatter its defense. To the pig, his punches feel like annoying little pokes fueling its beastly ego. Heinz sweats the lack of damage, but that's exactly what our boy mapped out. He's trolling the monster, tilting it into a fatal misplay. The beast snaps, charging up its signature roar. Van spots the devastating roar breaker queuing up for activation. That's the cue. He barks at the Wind Mage to drop his nuke. The noble spams Rending Sky, shotgunning a hurricane straight down the creature's throat. The pressure violently suffocates the monster, detonating its own blast right inside its jaws. Anchoring his stance, Van exploits the stagger, dropping straight into the beast's blind spot. He snaps his hands together and triggers Doppelganger's secret move to generate a massive tremor. The blast sends violent shockwaves crashing inward, designed to pulverize the monster's brain to mush. Bullseye. The combo lands flawlessly, dropping the demonic beast into the dirt for good. The magic shield shatters. Van instantly yells at the noble kid this is the exact window they needed. Chasing the ultimate killsteal, the elite acts on instinct, diving right in, shredding through the beast's skull and officially scoring the elimination. The Wind Mage is absolutely losing his mind, hyperventilating over the fact that they actually just clutched up against a literal Hellboar. Meanwhile, Van casually dusts himself off and strolls over to the shaken noble. Sticking a hand out, he simply checks if the dude is still breathing. Checking to see if his legs still work, the snobby royal finally ditches his elite ego for a second and snatches our guy's hand to hoist himself up, whining that his bones feel like shattered glass from that massive sonic blast. Van, cool as ice, breaks it down. That roar was packed with heavy mana, which absolutely trashed his equilibrium. The ex-hitman drops some pro advice, telling him to block his ears next time, to tank the shockwave way better. Rocking a weak smirk, the rich kid promises to lock that tip in the vault, even though he is praying to never cross paths with another Hellboar in this lifetime. With the beast officially flatlined, Van pivots back to the main quest, securing those exam-passing flowers. But plot twist, only 2 Heaven's Tier blooms survived the chaos. Flashbacks hit our hero hard, remembering the Proctor's warning about squad missions backfiring big time. Pure panic starts creeping up his spine as his brain scrambles for a fix, knowing the clock is at dead zero. But before he can even cook up a strategy, the wind-slinging noble swoops in and snatches both petals without blinking. Striding straight over to Prince Heinz, he bows and serves up 1 bloom on a silver platter. The royal accepts the loot with 0 fuss, dropping a chill "Thank you." Catching this VIP treatment, our guy openly roasts the wind user, calling him out for gifting a passing grade to a dude who literally just spectated the whole boss fight. He totally claps back, asking if that is supposed to be a low-key bribe. Sparking up instantly, the noble snaps, barking that it is just day one loyalty for a king's guard. But wait for it. He spins around and shoves the second flower right at Van. Our boy's brain basically blue screens. He definitely did not see that plot twist coming. Frozen in pure shock, he actually asks the rich kid if his hand slipped or something. Deadpan the noble insists it was 100% intentional, claiming he is just clearing his tab, absolutely refusing to owe his life to a dirt-born commoner. Plus, he strictly demands Van to drop the Wind User nickname, flexing that he actually has a real title. He officially drops his name as Falk, while his sidekick steps up to the mic and claims the name Ralph. Van matches their energy, dropping his own tag before locking in a quick handshake. But just as our MC jokes that they are practically ghosts if the duo flunks the test, the prince slices through the banter, commanding them to hold up. Heinz stoops down, scoops up a handful of crushed dead petals, and blasts them with his holy light magic until they literally respawn. The exact second those flowers glow up, Falk and Ralph are utterly shook. Their eyes go wide, hardcore fangirling over how insanely blessed they are to witness the royals' god-tier grace. Our guy Zero Chills given violently murders the vibe and barks that the sun is dipping fast, meaning they need to speed run back to base. Falk goes feral, screaming at him to stop playing commander when an actual prince is breathing the same air as them. Right as they pivot to bounce, Heinz casually drops a massive reality check. He calls out Van for secretly erasing his tracks with dirt the entire hike. And in his playbook, ghosting your own footsteps is a textbook Shadow Walker flex. He starts spilling the tea on Van's crazy combat mechanics during the boss raid, stacked with those hyper-lethal micro-movements, basically proving this dude is no random NPC but a cold-blooded academy-trained killer. Hearing his cover-blown icy dread floods our hero's veins. He starts sweating bullets, wondering if he flexed way too hard and completely nuked his disguise. Truth is, His Highness is hauling around a massive load of lethal paranoia, since he is practically swimming in a shark tank of enemies. The king had wifed up a bunch of conquered princesses to secure the throne, spinning a mega-toxic web of palace drama. Heinz's mom, Queen Number 5, is a pure-blooded VIP from their own turf, handing him elite main character status. Because of that crown jewel bloodline, the rival stepmoms and half-siblings see him as an endgame threat, terrified the king will hand him the crown, crushed under that insane target on his back. Heinz sleeps with one eye open, betting his life that a hitman could zero in on him literally any second. And after scanning all those red flags, he is dead set on the theory that Van himself, this guy might literally be a sleeper agent sent to wipe him out. If that's the reality, brushing it off just isn't an option, and he seriously debates just ending the threat right then and there. Meanwhile, cold sweat starts beating down Van's face. As it violently hits him, old habits really do die hard. No matter how much he tries to act normal, he can't erase his past as a literal shadow killer from before his regression. The real kicker, he absolutely cannot drop that kind of lore right now, and even if he spilled the tea, these guys would just think he's completely delusional, knowing that he realizes he has to cook up an absolute masterclass bluff to wiggle his way out of this trap. Van totally plays it cool, shrugging the accusations off by claiming he had zero clue. Those moves were considered standard assassin protocol. Prince Heinz, though, reads right through that weak cover story, refusing to buy a single word of it. Still, our boy switches up his vibe, telling the royal to believe whatever helps him sleep at night, standing 10 toes down on his lie. With every tick of the clock, the tension in the air gets thick enough to slice with a knife. Suddenly, Van starts closing the distance, stalking straight toward the prince. Falk instantly jumps in, throwing himself forward to body block him. But in a split second, our boy literally vanishes into thin air and glitches right into the prince's personal space. Casually clapping a hand on his shoulder, Van chuckles and says he was just messing around, begging him to drop the hardcore death glare. He then hits him with the excuse that he simply isn't wired for high-class manners, playing the wild card of being a clueless country bumpkin who never got a proper lesson in royal etiquette. He drops a tiny bow, keeping his poker face perfectly locked in to make sure not a single ounce of his actual panic leaks out. Heinz, though, is absolutely done playing mental gymnastics and demands he stop dodging the bullet. He brings up that insane footwork again, pointing out how it straight up looked like teleportation, and asks him point blank if he's a hitman. This time, Van drops a way more solid alibi, claiming he picked up those moves from Helene Steinhardt's, the exact VIP who gave him the golden ticket to this academy. He totally caps, saying the lady strictly warned him to keep his skills under wraps since his combat prowess is the only trump card he actually... Deep down, our boy feels a tiny sting of guilt for name-dropping her without a heads up. But honestly, that answer works like absolute magic, finally getting the prince to drop his guard. Even Ralph looks visibly shook the second her name drops, proving that her bloodline flexes a level of power that even the royals don't mess with. Hearing that heavy-hitting name, the prince flashes back to the absolute legend known as the Ice Flower Lady. He knows for a fact she's top-tier royalty at the academy. The only part he's struggling to process is why a flawless noble like her would even dabble in shady assassin moves. But he doesn't overthink it for too long. At the end of the day, he's totally certain her family would never risk their necks, plotting to off a literal prince. Ralph then steps up and grills Van, demanding to know why someone of Helene's insane status would ever vouch for a total nobody from the dirt. Our boy keeps it 100, shrugging that he's just as clueless, explaining her only instructions were to show up at the academy, holding her glowing letter of recommendation. The prince chimes in with his own theory, guessing that Helene probably wanted to secretly buff Van's stats, personally molding him to eventually join her faction. The other rich kids start nodding along, especially after seeing Van's broken skills up close. With the tension finally melting away, the prince humbles himself and politely says thanks, admitting he would have been totally cooked if he had to face that monster solo. He straight up confesses he owes Van his life, even dropping a slight bow out of pure respect. Van, being the absolute menace he is, doesn't even flinch, casually mentioning that they weren't exactly throwing hands to save the prince in the first place. Falk instantly barks at him for the massive disrespect, but our boy truly could not care less, especially after all the crazy stuff he just survived. The prince quietly takes mental notes, realizing how this absolute madman chooses to dish out low-key roasts instead of begging for a royal reward. As the time limit finally clocks out, students start dragging themselves back from the forest. Some are clutching the rare flowers they managed to snag, while the rest stumble back totally battered, running on fumes and completely empty. A heavy cloud of doom hangs over the losers, terrified of how they're going to face their super strict families, after massively fumbling their chance to secure a spot at this elite academy. Meanwhile, the shady professor is sweating bullets. The prince is officially missing in action, and he is starting to panic. He meticulously rigged the exam, so only low-tier trash mobs roamed the woods, easy pickings for royalty. But what is really eating at him is that his secret weapon, the Hell's Boar, is nowhere to be found either. Right on cue, a squad of 4 steps out from the tree line. For a split second, the professor sighs in relief, seeing the royal heir completely untouched. But that relief instantly morphs into pure, unadulterated rage. The second he locks eyes with Van, the main examiner rushes over, frantically checking our guy for any scratches. Meanwhile, the corrupt professor completely loses his mind, accidentally screaming out that Van should be a corpse by now. Playing the absolute innocence card, our boy tilts his head and asks if the old man is mad that he actually survived. Realizing he just snitched on himself, the professor chokes on his words and scrambles to save face. He stammers out that he was just blown away by Van's miraculous return. But Van casually drops a bomb, mentioning they brought a little souvenir. The rest of the crew steps out of the shadows, visibly straining as they haul a colossal bloody sack across the dirt. The professor practically flatlines, staring wide-eyed at his absolute worst nightmare. Even the examiner's jaw hits the floor, questioning if they actually bagged a high-tier magic beast. The squad casually explains they think this monster was an actual hitman sent for the prince, so they drag the severed head all the way back as receipts. Utter silence drops over the 2 instructors, though their mental gears are spinning in totally opposite directions. The examiner is absolutely baffled, trying to figure out how a deadly apex predator breached the testing grounds, while the professor is completely shattered that his ultimate trap failed to eliminate the prince. Suddenly, all eyes laser onto him, catching the snake totally off guard again. Lucky for him, His Highness completely hijacks the spotlight by showering the squad with massive praise. Seeing the royal looking fresh and untouchable just twists the knife deeper into the professor's gut. Bowing respectfully, the examiner asks if the royal heir jumped into the brawl. The prince gives a chill smile and admits he was basically just watching from the VIP seats. Boom! The professor instantly realizes he is backed into a lethal corner. If word leaks that he unleashed a mutant monster on the future king, he is not just getting fired, he is getting executed. With a perfectly innocent smile, the prince asks why the professor is looking like he just saw a ghost. Flipping the script in a heartbeat, the rat-faced professor starts sucking up, hyping up the prince for slaughtering such an overpowered nightmare. But His Highness politely shuts that down, reminding the sweating old man that he literally did not lift a finger. The real heroes were his teammates, and the undisputed carry of the match, Van. He solo carried the entire squad and kept everyone breathing. That revelation completely paralyzes both teachers. The room is stunned. Nobody wants to swallow the pill that an Agolda flexed harder than anyone else out there. Ralph instantly vouches for him, swearing on his life that Van's magical IQ is straight up terrifying for an Agolda. Meanwhile, a timid Dietrich chimes in, backing up the prince's massive hype and confirming Van is the real deal. The professor just stands there, completely frozen, violently rejecting the reality where a lowborn Agolda steals the show. But the prince drops the final mic smoothly, adding that this insane power makes total sense for a prodigy handpicked by the legendary House of Steinhertz. Truth is, Van did not learn a single thing from Helen, but he rolls with the lie, keeping his mouth shut. From there, the gossip mill catches fire, spreading wild rumors about the overpowered Agolda, backed by the Ice Blossom Lady herself. Hearing all this, the head examiner practically bows to our boy, pouring out his absolute deepest thanks. Because in this world, acting as the royal human shield is the ultimate flex and highest honor you can offer the crown. Savage as always, Van cuts him off bluntly, stating he did not give a damn about protecting any prince. Keeping the royal breathing was just a lucky side effect of him slaughtering that oversized beast. Dropping that cold truth, he aggressively pivots the chat back to what actually matters. One by one, the boys whip out their winning blue flowers. The examiner shoots the professor a look that screams to wrap it up. Choking back his absolute disgust, the corrupt instructor is forced to do his job. He calls out the three names, painfully spitting out Van's name at the very end, and officially stamps their passing grades. Boom! Our boy is officially an academy student. With the drama settled, the prince tosses an order to the examiner to launch a hardcore investigation into how that demonic beast crashed their exam. The scene cuts straight to the academy's massive welcome ceremony. The headmaster grabs the mic, dropping a harsh reality check. This school is not a playground for kids who are just mildly good at casting spells. The entire point of this academy molding raw talent into elite protectors ready to bleed for the crown. Surrounded by snobby spellcasters, Van just soaks it all in, totally vibing with the massive upgrade his life just got. Back in his first life, just breathing the same air as this campus was a pipe dream, never mind actually strutting the halls as an official student. Gazing down from a balcony, Helene locks her eyes on the young prodigy. The absolute wild card she bets will finally shatter the kingdom's toxic bias against the Garuda bloodline. A little later, her heels click against the marble corridors leading straight to a heavily gilded set of double doors. Beyond them lies a shadowy war room. 4 figures already occupy a massive circular table, leaving just a single chair vacant. 4 pairs of icy eyes instantly dart toward the girl. Sword Princess Karina Rautele snaps first, completely annoyed that Helene is smirking after wasting her ultra-valuable time. On the flip side, Amelia Rodovolt keeps her cool, casually questioning why they even bothered calling this emergency huddle. The Quiet Fist. Arnold Clavius cuts to the chase. Tonight, there is only one giant elephant in the room to discuss. 8th Prince Leonis spells it out with venom in his voice. They need to figure out what to do with the total fraud currently trespassing on their turf. Genuinely lost, Amelia tilts her head, asking him to drop the riddles and explain. Arnold steps in, breaking down how letting the first ever Garuda kid step foot on campus has totally sent the high society elites into a complete meltdown. Karina scoffs hard. She mocks the whole situation sarcastically, dropping that, if the bar gets any lower, they will be handing out acceptance letters to literal monsters next. But honestly, the guy treating Van's admission like a personal attack is Leonis. He whips his head toward Helene, the final piece of their elite squad known as the 5 Radiant Crowns. Pounding the table, he demands a rock-solid excuse for why she actively backed a so-called filthy Garuda to crash their insanely prestigious school. Keep in mind, this academy is the ultimate hub where the absolute highest-ranking royals and overpowered mages all clash under one roof. And when you cram that many massive egos into one space, brutal turf wars over pride are basically a daily routine. To keep the chaos in check, the 5 Radiant Crowns wield absolute authority, acting as the ultimate law enforcers on campus. Bubbling with rage, Leonis interrogates why a top-tier noble like Helene would make such an embarrassingly trash call. Without missing a single beat, Helene fires back. She saw Van's raw power firsthand and knows his talent is the real deal. The Sword Princess practically gags at the thought, completely incapable of processing the words strong and Garuda in the exact same. In her mind, a bloodline curse straight from birth could never be anything but dead weight in a real fight. Even the usually chill Amelia backs her up, claiming it defies all logic. A species with zero magic simply gets folded in actual combat. Smirking down his nose, Leonis roasts Helene, pointing out that she clearly missed the memo on basic common sense. Oh, that phrase instantly strikes a massive nerve. She bites back, shredding his logic by declaring that common sense is just a pathetic excuse lazy people use to dodge critical thinking and brainwash everyone else. Leonis turns bright red. His fragile ego simply cannot handle someone actively dunking on his authority. Before things get physical, Arnold smoothly jumps in with a pitch. Why not just drag the kid into an arena and stress test these supposedly god-tier skills? A wicked grin spreads across the prince's face. He loves the idea so much that he instantly slaps a brutal wager on it, ready to completely humiliate Helene if her golden boy flops. Helene cannot quite read his shady intentions, but she leaves them with a chilling warning. Do not sleep on the kid's potential. That cocky warning instantly sets off Karina, who aggressively volunteers to be the one to rip his abilities apart. Giving the green light, Leonis orders her to absolutely crush the outsider. Brushing past Helene's shoulder, Karina leans in and sneers, asking if she just keeps the Garuda boy around as a weird little pet. Karina promises one thing. She is going to completely dismantle Helene's shiny new toy right in front of her, and drag that bloated ego of hers through the mud while doing it. Fast forward, Van is casually strolling the halls solo. Sure, he catches a few toxic glares and salty whispers, but honestly, his campus life is coasting by surprisingly chill. He thinks back to his last lecture, where a super petty professor tried to openly roast him by throwing out an insanely high-level magic theory question. The entire room went dead silent. That stuff was light years beyond what any of these freshmen could even grasp. The shady teacher just laughed it off, smugly claiming it was totally brain-dead to expect a lowly Garuda to even comprehend the assignment. He even poured salt on the wound, cracking a joke about how Van's kind are not exactly the brightest bulbs when it comes to hitting the books. But Van completely flipped the script. He casually hijacked the entire lecture, dropping such massive knowledge bombs that he basically made the crusty old professor look like an absolute clown. Ever since he publicly bodied the teacher like that, nobody has dared to try any funny business with him again. Bam! A sudden heavy slap on the back violently yanks him out of his daydream. It is Ralph hyped up and dragging him along to grab some grub. Our guy genuinely thanks him for always having his back. Meanwhile, Ralph just stares at him like a deer in headlights, completely clueless about why things just get so deep. The duo makes a beeline for the dining hall. Mid-stroll, some purple-haired chick barks out his name, stopping them dead in their tracks. She is glaring daggers at him, acting like he just committed a federal offense by simply existing in her airspace without bowing down. Both guys immediately dish out a genuine apology, but Van's jaw practically hits the floor when this lunatic presses cold steel right against his throat. He straight up demands to know what her deal is. Flashing a toxic, arrogant smirk, she snaps back that a low-tier scrub like a Gilda should be groveling in the dirt. My dude does not even flinch. He shoots back that they wear the exact same academy uniform, and he is absolutely not kissing the pavement, just to feed her ego. Her eyes ice over and she sneers, questioning if he even comprehends his bottom feeder status inside these campus walls. Out of nowhere, Ralph slides into the crossfire defending his bro, and calling out her massive overreaction. This girl doubles down, preaching that brutal discipline is the only way to keep the peasants in line. Van gives a tiny nod, admitting that upperclassmen earn respect. But he is definitely not vibing with some unhinged random trying to extract obedience at sword point. He clamps his bare hand over her steel, totally locking her weapon in place so she cannot budge it an inch. With one savage twist, he sends her into a total tailspin. Desperate, she channels all her mana into the hilt, and in a flash, Van executes a flawless, devastating strike that shatters her weapon like glass. The moment her brain registers, the legendary Sever Edge technique, this previously smug senior starts sweating bullets, coming at him with a katana was a massive rookie mistake. Sure, noobs love zinc because it conducts mana like a dream, but the metal is way too fragile for an actual deathmatch. The purple-haired chick whines that she is not even authorized to pack authentic steel on academy grounds. That elite VIP perk is strictly reserved for the 5 Radiant Crowns. Catching that flashy title for the first time, Van's curiosity peaks. Perfectly on cue, the Sword Princess herself crashes the party, icing him with formal accusations of trashing property and disrespecting the hierarchy. The purple-haired bully instantly drops to her knees, bowing her head and trembling out the name Lady Karina. Just hearing that specific name jolts our hero's brain like a lightning bolt. In his past life, you would have to be living under a rock to not know Karina, the infamous Bloodblade. His mind totally short-circuits. What the hell is the actual Angel of Death doing strolling through the academy hallways? Flashback to his brutal assassin days before the time loop. The entire kingdom was engulfed in massive bloody rebellions. The most lethal faction was a fanatic purification cult called the White Annihilation Ring, and Lady Karina was their undisputed nightmare. He remembers her as the Blood Edge, a monster in human skin, who butchered legendary heroes for fun, just to wipe this radical cult off the map. The Empire sacrificed mountains of corpses. All that bloodshed ultimately sparked an even worse disaster, the catastrophic war for the royal throne. Our guy had only locked eyes with Karina once on the battlefield, but that split second was permanently burned into his retinas forever. Because of that trauma, his brain simply cannot process Why one of the realm's deadliest future villains is casually attending their most elite prestigious prep school. While Van is spiraling in his own head, Karina catches him staring and immediately slaps another strike onto his permanent record. She coldly brands his attitude as trash, calling him out for blatantly ogling his superior. Our boy drops a quick apology, but absolutely laces it with sarcasm, effortlessly throwing shade by murmuring that he definitely does not see her as someone sitting above him. Sweating bullets, the noble kid desperately tries to shut Van up, before he digs his own grave, frantically whispering about her terrifying reputation. He spills the tie that she is a literal radiant. When our guy plays dumb, Ralph jumps in to explain that the 5 Radiants are the absolute top-tier apex predators of the school, freaks of nature whose combat skills break the scaling system. He hypes Karina up as a generational prodigy, who crushed the entrance exams at just 13 years old. Connecting the dots, Van finally realizes that this future mass murderer must have originally belonged to a hyper-elite aristocratic bloodline. The crazy part in his past life proves the kingdom must have totally scrubbed her identity the second she went rogue. He never in a million years thought he would bump into her villain origin story like this. And that realization triggers a ridiculously dark, intrusive thought. Van genuinely considers if he should just assassinate her right here, right now, before the timeline goes to hell. If he slices her throat today, he practically rips the future terrorist cult out by its roots. And if that bloody uprising never kicks off, the massive civil war gets totally cancelled, meaning the tyrant Hines might never steal the crown. While our guy is busy plotting murder, Karina catches him zoning out again. Her eyes narrow as she warns him that she has official clearance to wield lethal steel. Without warning, she drops into a combat stance so terrifyingly flawless it could slice a man's head off in a microsecond, moving so fast you would not even see the blade flash. Ralph practically begs our dude to grovel before he gets himself slaughtered, but Van just brushes him off, his voice dead calm. "Gotta check something," he mutters, gesturing for the guy to back up. Dropping into a rock-solid combat stance, he practically begs her to swing. And oh boy, the 1,000-blade sword princess. She is absolutely fuming. She lunges forward, radiating pure, unfiltered killer intent. Her blade cuts through the air so blindingly fast, a normal person wouldn't even register the blur. But Van weaves through the danger by a hair. What should have been a one-way ticket to the grave ends up as just a tiny scratch. Suddenly, Karina hits the brakes. She loudly announces a rain check on his beatdown, promising to finish the job later. Flipping her hair, she marches off with her purple-haired sidekick trailing behind. Once they vanish into a dead quiet spot, far from any prying eyes, the sidekick drops the bombshell question, why on earth did she let that dude walk away? The sword princess bites her lip, desperately trying to keep her cool. She slumps against the wall, her voice trembling. "I didn't let him walk," she breathes out. Locking eyes with her friend, she demands absolute silence about what just went down, completely exposing a gnarly hidden bruise from the clash. Her mind races, flashing back to some dusty ancient combat manual she obsessed over way back. A pressure point. A brutal strike specifically engineered to scramble the nervous system, leaving the victim totally paralyzed and stumbling around like a glitching NPC. Catching her breath, her purple-haired bestie assumes it was a tie begging for the tea, but Karina just bites her tongue. Internally, her reality is crumbling. It wasn't a tie, not even close. When the clash hit its peak, she went straight for the jugular. Yet Van completely phased into her blind spot, locking his crosshairs onto her fatal weakness. Panic flared. She scrambled back to evade, but that desperate retreat completely ruined her aim. Our guy surged forward like a phantom, sniping her nerve cluster with terrifying god-tier precision. What really messes with Karina's head? That strike is legendary, a top-tier secret heavily guarded by elite academies. How in the world did this random guy master it? Meanwhile, her purple-haired minion is absolutely chugging the copium, aggressively insisting it wasn't a draw. She hypes Karina up, swearing the princess won because she didn't hit the floor. Karina pastes on a fake smile and nods along, but the truth is burning her up inside. That specific nerve strike isn't designed to end a life. It just delivers agonizing, soul-crushing pain, meaning he pulled his punches on purpose. If this had been a real survival game, she knows for a fact she'd be booking a one-way ticket straight to the Shadow Realm right now. Shaking off the terror, she forces herself to stand. "I just slipped up," she lies through her teeth. "But trust me, next round I'm bringing cold steel to completely shatter his defenses." Cutting back to the main man, Ralph is practically interrogating him about his secret motive. Van totally ignores the nagging, but the dude simply won't quit yapping, begging for answers. Meanwhile, our boy entirely zones out, getting swallowed by his own thoughts. It clicks. Despite radiating pure menace, the sword princess seriously nerfed herself. She didn't even bother pulling out her signature magic. Sure, she dressed it up as a brutal execution, but she never actually intended to break him. Without warning, Van casually drops, "Karina's actually pretty sweet." Ralph's jaw literally hits the floor, but Van's intuition is locked in. He's 100% convinced she hasn't morphed into the infamous Bloodblade yet. And right then and there, he vows to totally rewrite her tragic storyline. Ralph just waves it off, figuring the guy's brain got rattled during the scrap. The second Van steps foot back into the homeroom, dead silence drops. The entire room dodges his eye contact like the plague. He slides into his desk and instantly the whole squad, "Bombs!" starts furiously whispering about the absolute chaos that went down in the corridors. Our guy flashes a totally awkward grin right before his two wingmen slide up. They hype him up, swearing that haters are gonna hate. Ralph volunteers to tag along and beg for mercy from the fiery royal, while Falk flexes his rich kid status, promising his dad can easily sweep the whole mess under the rug. Van just chuckles, telling these absolute bros to stop stressing over drama that isn't theirs. He roasts them a bit, pointing out how much they've completely evolved since day one, genuinely touched by their loyalty. But he's totally locked in on finishing this boss fight solo. The boys stare at him completely dumbfounded, demanding to know what crazy stunt he's plotting. In his own mind, our guy knows the absolute stakes. To completely erase the terrifying Bloodblade timeline from history, he has to confront the issue head-on right here, right now. Shrugging, Van casually roasts the legendary 5 Radiants, calling them basically just glorified hall monitors. "They're honestly nothing crazy," he smirks. Falk and Ralph look like their souls just left their bodies at that absolute disrespect. They frantically ask if he's lost his actual mind. But before the panic peaks, the spotlight abruptly snaps to Helene gliding through the doorway. Her voice slices through the tension, calling him out loud and clear. Kicking back in his chair, he casually demands what the big deal is. Keeping it classy, she asks him to step out for a quick chat, promising it'll be a speed run since her next lecture is creeping up. He locks eyes with her for a tense beat. He totally knows this isn't an optional side quest. The moment they step out the door, the entire classroom completely short-circuits. Literally 0 people have ever dared to vibe with the untouchable Ice Blossom lady like that. The scene fades into a vibrant flower garden, zooming in on an elegant tea table, the absolute perfect spot for an off-the-record chat. Flashing a soft smile, Helene drops a massive bombshell. The 5 Radiants totally plotted to send Karina his way to gauge his raw power. He fires back with heavy sarcasm, muttering that her heads-up arrived way too late. Unbothered, Helene keeps her upbeat vibe, confessing she never imagined Karina would actually pull up to fight. Because Karina is basically hardwired to take over the legendary Luthier Sword clan, her insane combat skills don't really shock Van. But his gut tells him she isn't just some textbook prodigy flexing her title. There's a much darker layer to her vibe. Helene tilts her head, totally intrigued, and pushes him to explain. Struggling to find the right words, he finally blurts out. She radiates this intense energy, almost like she threw away everything else in her life, leaving nothing behind but her blade. Helene's eyes instantly sharpen at that heavy observation, and she quietly hypes up his dead-on intuition. She spills the real lore. Karina is far from your average silver spoon luthier kid. Turns out, she was actually the secret product of a forbidden affair with a maid, totally treated like a ghost and never officially claimed by the bloodline. But the whole script flipped when she hit age 10. During what was supposed to be a casual sparring match, she absolutely demolished her 17-year-old half-brother. Back then, the entire household was dead set on the brother becoming the golden heir, but her terrifying display of raw genius literally forced the elders to rewrite the rules. Even after drowning in toxic jealousy and pure hatred her whole life, they had no choice but to crown her the future head of the house, completely ignoring her illegitimate roots. Processing this wild backstory, Van questions how an outsider like Helene got her hands on such classified family drama. Helene lets out a soft, knowing laugh and whispers, "High society practically breathes toxic gossip." Brushing that aside, her mind drifts back to the very first time she locked eyes with Karina, way before the academy kickoff, right in the middle of a stuffy high-class banquet. The poor girl was banished to a shadowy corner, completely isolated, while everyone blatantly ghosted her. She didn't make a peep, coldly scanning the room, watching her own dad aggressively ignore her, laughing with other elites, like she was literally invisible. You could see the devastating weight of his cold fatherly neglect completely hollowing out her dead soulless eyes. Catching how much genuine empathy Helene feels for the swordswoman, he straight up asks why she didn't just walk over and talk to her. Helene sighs, explaining that high society rules made it ridiculously complicated. Being the face of a rival powerhouse family, crashing their personal boundaries was a huge no-go. It's basically social suicide to stick your nose into the Luthier family's toxic inner circle. Van lets out an exhausted sigh, instantly triggered by how incredibly draining these snobby noble politics actually are. Helene keeps going, mentioning that Karina probably wiped that traumatic night from her memory anyway. But watching the cutthroat family drama play out, she is low-key terrified. The twisted prodigy is marching straight toward a total villain arc. Van's face instantly drops into a deadly serious stare as he asks what she plans to do if that nightmare actually comes true. Without missing a single beat, Helene fiercely declares she would burn through every last drop of her power to shut her down before it is too late. That soul-crushing regret rotting inside her, it was a permanent stain. Suddenly the puzzle pieces clicked together in his mind. He always knew Helene was built different, destined to carve her name into the history books as a legendary powerhouse. But in his past life, complete radio silence. She probably met a brutal end trying to pull Karina back from the edge of madness. Reading his mind, Helene immediately shuts down the pity party. She reminds him she is still a cold-blooded blade, a lethal prodigy who would slice him open without blinking. But our boy just smirks, firing back that he gets the memo loud and clear. In fact, her little threat just threw gasoline on his fire. Locking eyes with her icy gaze, he vows to wipe that deep-rooted regret clean. Sure, Karina was an absolute monster in his previous timeline, but now he has the ultimate cheat code to choke out the threat before it even blooms. Caught off guard by she was secretly praying he would jump in to help. But talk is cheap. She challenges him, demanding to know if he actually possesses a way to break through her flawless sword technique. Van drops a cocky nod and effortlessly tells her to catch him after class for a live demonstration. Fast forward to twilight. Ralph and Falk are creeping through the dense woods on a manhunt for him. Falk is sweating bullets about stalking their buddy. On the flip side, Ralph is insanely suspicious about his sudden disappearing act. You literally cannot blame the guy for snooping, after catching their boy slipping into the shadows, completely alone with the infamous Ice Princess. Falk desperately tries to dodge the topic. Suddenly their jaws drop as they spot our main guy anchored dead center in a raging blizzard. Right across from him, Helene is going absolutely savage. A catastrophic barrage of razor-sharp frost lances bombs down on him with zero hesitation. Catching their terrified screams, he totally drops his guard to look back. But the brutal Ice Princess, she does not give free passes. Punishing his rookie mistake of breaking focus, she immediately triggers her ultimate move, unleashing the thousand thorns of the Ice Garden. Colossal jagged frost vines blast straight at the trio. Ralph and Falk mentally prepare to meet their maker. But in a split second, Van unleashes a single, pinpoint/atomizing the apocalyptic spell into sparkling dust. He swivels around, flashing an insanely cheeky grin, hyped that they crash the party. He casually dares them to team up with Helene and jump him, flexing that he is dying for a decent warm-up. Scene cut to Simon striding in with a slick greeting for Karina. So she ruthlessly cuts to the chase, demanding to know what His Royal Highness wants from her. Playing it cool, Simon claims he is not here to pressure her, but he is dying to know what wild strategy she cooked up to exterminate the Garuda in their upcoming deathmatch. Karina drops a mock bow, smirking that the bloodbath is right around the corner, as the special care package from her bloodline just hit her doorstep. A devilish spark flashes in Simon's eyes the second he spots Anastasia stumbling into the room, practically breaking her back, dragging a massive gothic coffin. Panting, Anastasia begs. Without missing a beat, Karina coldly orders her to haul the creepy cargo straight to her bedroom, warning her to handle it like fragile glass. Simon's jaw is practically on the floor. An incredibly ancient, overwhelmingly menacing artifact pulsing with raw energy is just sitting right in his face. Blatantly flexing, Karina asks if this beast of a weapon will get the job done, wondering out loud if it is massive overkill just to squash a pathetic Garuda. Simon, being the drama king he is, totally refuses to keep things low-key. He wants a blockbuster cinematic execution. He hypes her up, calling her a walking, breathing weapon of mass destruction, a prodigy whose terrifying talent demands an epic spotlight. And for a monster like her, no backdrop hits harder than this exact moment, to completely traumatize the audience with her sheer power. Flash over to the academy corridors, where a bombshell notice just dropped on the bulletin board, sending the entire student body into a chaotic frenzy. The explosive poster declares that Karina, one of the untouchable 5 brilliant crowns, just threw down an official gauntlet against the rookie Van, masking the blood sport as discipline for wrecking campus peace. The rumor mill goes into overdrive in literal seconds, with swarms of students crowding the hallway, buzzing with terrified whispers. Every single person knows this is not some friendly sparring match. The The dark consensus echoing through is that our boy just walked blindly into a meticulously rigged execution. The imminent clash is scheduled to pop off, straight inside the Royal Academy's colossal proving grounds. Universally dubbed by the kids as the Chalk Ring Arena. But do not get it twisted, this is no sandbox, it is a legendary coliseum, strictly reserved for settling blood feuds and hosting brutal survival trials that completely shatter a fighter's mind and body. Thanks to its gruesome history, that dirt ring commands massive respect on campus. Flash forward to game day, and the atmosphere is incredibly suffocating, thick with nerve-wracking tension. Students flood the arena stands from every corner of the campus, their loud chatter and burning curiosity zeroed in on the center ring. Down in the dirt, Van casually rolls his shoulders and stretches out, just waiting for the brawl to kick off. The roaring crowd practically doubles by the minute. Nobody wants to miss out on what is hyped to be the most legendary showdown in the Academy's history. Looking around, Ralph mutters that the vibe in the Coliseum feels insanely dark. Falk scoffs, pointing out the obvious reason this massive mob showed up. Deep down, everyone knows this is not going to be a fair fight. Ralph frowns, totally lost, leaving Helene to drop the brutal truth. She flat out says this is not a match. It is a brutal, pitting one of the top tier 5 Radiants against a bottom rung Garuda. Everyone expects a completely one-sided massacre. That absolute bloodbath is exactly what this bloodthirsty audience bought tickets to see. Ralph shrugs, admitting that the clueless masses might view it that way. But Falk finishes the thought with a smirk. Their squad already knows the insane, monstrous strength Van is hiding. You literally cannot measure the guy with standard logic. Helene then shifts her gaze up to the VIP box, spotting the royal heir looming over the pit. She whispers that the prince totally knows what is actually about to happen. Sure enough, Prince Hines sits perched above the chaos, watching the stage with ice-cold focus. Spotting the royal from across the stands, Simon scratches his head, wondering why royalty would waste time on a low-tier scrap. Drawing a total blank, he refocuses as the massive iron gates groan open. Karina struts into the light, literally dragging a massive heavy coffin with both hands. The second Ralph spots the huge box, his jaw drops in utter panic. Helene quickly warns him that Karina brought a ridiculously overpowered relic to the ring. Even Van blinks in pure shock when she drops the literal casket right in front of him. He cracks a dry smile, joking that she must have brought a casket just for his funeral. Though he playfully adds that she might be jumping the gun just a little bit, Karina just glares, ordering him to cut the tough guy act. She coldly promises that this very box will be his tombstone. With a heavy clank, the lid flings open, revealing a terrifying arsenal of deadly blades locked inside, glowing with intense ancient magical runes. This absolute cheat code is the legendary sword coffin, a literal walking armory handed down through generations of hardcore Lutetia sword saints. Falk freaks out, questioning why these so-called saints would even forge something so overwhelmingly broken. Yanking a razor-sharp blade from the rack, Karina levels the tip straight at Van's throat. She snarls that he will bitterly regret the day he ever stepped foot on their campus. The joke vanishes from Van's face. No more smiling. His eyes go dead serious. He fires back that she will be the one crying when he shatters her precious little coffin right in front of the entire school. He tilts his head, asking when the bell rings. Karina barks that it already did, and the two immediately explode into a head-on collision. But Karina completely miscalculated Van's terrifying god-tier speed. One frame he is 50 feet away, and in literally a millisecond, he materializes right in her personal space. She barely manages to throw up a desperate block, while Van casually compliments her snappy reflexes. Inside, her brain is short-circuiting, and the entire stadium is shook. Nobody can comprehend how a trash-tier Garuda is breaking the speed limit. Whispers of instant teleportation magic ripple through the bleachers. The students completely buy into it, since literally nothing else makes sense. Except that makes zero sense. A bottom feeder like him should not possess a single drop of magic in his veins. Sweating, Falk squints at the arena, admitting that no matter how often he sees this crazy stunt, it completely looks like a cheat code spell. Helene coldly shuts him down, explaining that zero magic is involved here. It is a broken martial art called Phantom Step. Normally, when fighters push forward, they kick off the dirt. The body has to shift through a whole dragging sequence of motions. But Van totally bypasses that clunky launch. Instead, he weaponizes his center of gravity to literally glide his entire frame across the ground, snapping his hips with insane torque to generate it. That is the terrifying secret behind his footwork. It creates this creepy optical illusion where he glides forward like he has actual rockets strapped to his boots. Even with the play-by-play breakdown, the guys are left scratching their heads, completely mind-blown. The terrifying truth, when you are staring down that move in close quarters, it is functionally identical to teleportation. Just like when Helene got her first glimpse of this freakish skill, Back in the Garuda Woods, she swore she had just witnessed straight-up sorcery. Falk gets hyped spotting this opening, knowing Van could totally own the close-quarters combat, since heavy broadswords desperately need breathing room to swing. But the clash flips the script entirely. Karina blasts forward, unleashing a relentless flurry of thrusts that forces Van to backpedal, slicing a stinging gash across his arm. The fierce noble already clocked his game plan, hug the inside pocket to dodge her weapon's deadly reach. But Van completely misses a crucial detail. Greatswords pack a dull metal patch right above the guard, called the ricasso. By gripping that bare steel in a savage, half-swording stance, a warrior maneuvers the massive blade like a lethal dagger in tight spaces. Ralph vividly recalls gritty war stories featuring this exact blood-soaked strategy. But seeing a highborn heiress actually master such a gritty brawler move, absolutely mind-blowing. Falk suddenly realizes the hype dubbing her the future sword saint is not just aristocratic glazing, it is a terrifying glimpse into her true destiny. Helen keeps her eyes glued to the dust-kicking brawl, dissecting every micro-movement. To her, risking close combat against a wildcard like Van screams. Karina shatters the gap once more, but Van claps back with a lightning-fast jab that connects hard, shoving her off balance. Refusing to let up, he sprints aggressively forward to rain down more relentless pressure. Simon scowls bitterly at the clash, convinced Karina is just tanking punches like an absolute rookie. Anastasia softly drops some heavy lore spell blades, rely on mana tracking, meaning purely physical blows are a total nightmare to dodge. Since Van throws down with zero magic aura, his fists move like literal ghosts to their mana-tuned senses. Karina, though, zero sweat. She is practically thriving in the chaos, shielded by an invisible mana ward wrapping her silhouette. She smirks, betting her life that basic brawler hits will never shatter her armor unless he magically powers up. Out of nowhere, a high-pitched shriek detonates inside her skull, like a ruptured eardrum, washing her vision in blinding crimson agony. Staggering and completely shook, she snarls at Van, demanding what twisted trick he just pulled. Van flashes a savage, mocking grin, roasting her elite upbringing by hinting her mana focus is just straight-up trash. That savage disrespect pushes Karina's fury over the edge. Smugly, Van reveals his secret weapon, the devastating air palm. The brutal art launches violently compressed wind straight from an open-handed thrust. That explosive pneumatic blast bypasses armor entirely, blasting a shockwave straight into the victim's fragile inner ear canals to wreck their balance. This insane breakdown ripples through the stands as the audience gasps, watching the totally impossible scene play out. The flawless sword princess is actually getting folded. Simon freezes in pure disbelief as she actively loses ground. Boiling rage consumes him. Seeing highborn royalty get bullied by a nobody in front of a live crowd is his literal worst nightmare. While Karina violently shakes off the skull-splitting migraine, Van casually flexes, asking if she wants to tap out and end this right now. Dropping the taunt, he rockets forward for the kill, but Karina slowly tilts her head up, flashing an absolutely psychotic, blood-chilling grin. Ice hits everyone's veins as the horrible truth clicks. Her falling back was never about losing. It was a deadly trap the entire time. With a feral scream, she drives her greatsword straight into the dirt, detonating a massive shockwave of pure aura. Seismic tremors rip apart the stadium tiles, blasting lethal shrapnel and massive dust clouds into the sky. The panicked crowd scrambles while Van digs his heels in analyzing the destruction. To his eyes, she just channels raw, terrifying mana directly into her strike. Even missing the physical cut, the sheer atmospheric pressure rattles his bones to absolute dust. Smirking through the chaos, Karina casually drops the lore on her terrifying strength. For centuries, absolute legends have bled and died just to conquer the ultimate art, the Heavenfall blade. But Van's sharp eyes catch the fatal glitch. Her steel is literally screaming, warping, under the god-tier energy surging through its core. Simon's nasty smirk instantly returns. He realizes his golden girl was just playing with her food this entire time. Unleashing this boss-level aura, it is painfully obvious that a low-tier brawler like Van is about to get completely vaporized. To Simon, the match is officially wrapped up. One clean hit from this monster attack, and Van is going to be reduced to ash and chalk. Yet Van does not even flinch. Stone-faced, he casually roasts her form, telling her to stop abusing her damn sword. Karina spits back that she usually babies her gear, but right now, she is ready to completely delete him and end this circus show with one final execution strike. Right then, she channels a terrifying surge of aura straight into her blade. The crowd totally freaks out, suddenly realizing she's actually going for the kill. Ralph and Falk nervously exchange panicked whispers, desperately trying to process the madness unfolding. Aline cuts them off, breaking down the grim reality. Look, she points out, Van is definitely landing his hits, but they just don't pack enough punch to one-shot her. Karina, meanwhile, is wielding the Heavenfall blade, a weapon literally capable of deleting Van from existence with just one swing. Which means she's letting him hit her on purpose. She's dragging it out just to flex for the audience. Helene chimes in, warning that if she triggers Heavenfall right, as Van closes the gap, even if he somehow dodges the main blade, the sheer blast radius at point-blank range will instantly vaporize him. Ralph and Falk go completely silent, sweating over what insane move Van could possibly pull off next. Out in the arena, Karina hoists her massive sword. "Just accept your place in the dirt," she sneers. "Grovel," she taunts, "and I might actually let you breathe." Van just smirks. With a totally cheeky vibe, he calls her out. "Man, you are weirdly obsessed with this whole..." She snaps right back, claiming it's literally just the natural order of the universe. To her, mana levels dictate a bloodline's entire worth, the absolute golden rule their country was built on. Van bursts out laughing. "Wow, textbook, noble answer, right there," he mocks, pushing her buttons. "But hey, does playing dress-up as an aristocrat actually make you one?" Karina completely freezes, caught off guard. The absolute disrespect gets under her skin instantly, but Van doesn't let up. He loudly drops a massive bomb. She's a half-blood carrying both commoner. He completely reads her to filth, saying that's exactly why she's trying so desperately to act superior. All just to beg for a scrap of Daddy's validation. That strikes a massive nerve. She completely locks up, terrified and deeply confused about how this random kid knows her darkest secret. Her humiliation rapidly mutates into pure explosive rage, and she completely overloads her blade with a blinding amount of power. The atmosphere in the stands turns suffocating. Everyone is dreading what comes next except Helene, whose eyes widen in realization. It clicks. Van is intentionally triggering Karina, so she'll blind fire her ultimate attack without a second thought. Ralph is totally lost. To him, this is pure suicide. Why on earth would Van poke the bear and gamble his own life just to make her lose her mind? But here's the thing, Van wasn't just yapping. He had ruthlessly ripped open the deep-seated shame she's carried her entire life. She always felt like an absolute fraud, impersonating high society. Yes, her dad is a lord, but her mom was just a concubine. Because of that dirty little secret, she was never truly accepted. Growing up, she obsessed over the elite, mimicking their duties and etiquette perfectly. But no matter how hard she tried, the imposter syndrome haunted her. She constantly felt the burning gaze of judgment just waiting for her to slip up. That silent, suffocating pressure was her shadow. Ironically, that exact trauma gave her a tiny spark of sympathy when she first saw Van strutting through the academy walls. Seeing a low-tier Garuda walk around with such insane, unapologetic swagger, she secretly related to him. That's why she stepped up to fight him today. She genuinely planned to just flex on him and let him walk away alive. But no, this absolute menace threw her hidden mercy right back in her face and shattered her ego. In her mind, he officially signed his own death warrant. "You are done!" Karina screams, bringing the massive sword down. Instead of running, Van instantly dashes straight at her. Karina drops the full apocalyptic power of Heavenfall right on his head. A massive shockwave hits, but as the smoke clears, Karina's breath catches in her throat. Van blocked it, barehanded. He is literally clutching the razor-sharp steel of her legendary weapon, holding it like a toy. The stadium's jaws hit the floor. A barehanded blade catch. He just fully neutralized a nuke level. To everyone watching, this is physically impossible. This breaks the very laws of physics. In actual high-stakes combat, catching a dropping guillotine of a sword with your bare flesh is just begging to lose an arm. But what Van just pulled off is completely next level. First, he perfectly syncs the downward velocity of his palm with the falling steel. They move as one. Then the microsecond flesh meets metal. He acts like a shock absorber, killing the blade's momentum. In that fraction of a millisecond before the swing finishes, he completely nullifies the impact and absorbs the crushing force. He bends his knees, dropping his center of gravity, and instantly shatters the arena floor beneath him. This counter move goes by the name Stillglyph, a signature technique of the Zero-style grasp. It is the exact same strategy he pulled off in the forest to bury Helene's frozen spears straight into the dirt. Van flashes a cocky smirk, teasingly admitting that her Heavenfall blade is definitely a top-tier finishing move. But he simply knows exactly how to neutralize its momentum. Karina screams in pure disbelief, insisting that is absolutely impossible. Yet in that split second of panic, her ironclad defense crumbles under the weight of her surging emotions. Van does not hesitate. He instantly launches a devastating blow right at her chest, blasting her backward until she violently slams into the massive coffin. As the dust settles, the once proud warrior crumbles, forced onto her knees right in the middle of the battleground. The whole Colosseum is paralyzed in shock. The deafening roar of the audience vanishes, leaving a suffocating, breathless silence. As thousands of eyes lock on to the mighty thousand-blade sword, whispers begin to ripple through the stands. Could this terrifying display actually be the hidden potential of the Garuda bloodline? Simon and Anastasia practically shatter their teeth in pure rage, while Ralph and Falk mentally scream in hype, praying Van finishes the job without a second thought. But Van has a completely different agenda. He just stands there chilling, totally giving Karina the space to snap out of her daze. Shaking off the impact, she forces her trembling body to stand. With a bruised ego, she demands to know why he did not just end it all right there. She fiercely spits out that she does not need a single drop of his pity. But Van instantly shuts that ridiculous theory down. He calmly states that pity is the absolute last thing on his mind. At the same time, he is not about to waste his energy flexing on a high-tier noble, especially when she is holding back. What he actually craves is a front-row seat to her absolute peak performance. He challenges her, demanding to see the raw, unfiltered Karina. Those words slice through her ego like a hot knife. Triggered beyond belief, Karina finally unlocks the sealed horror inside her coffin. She plunges her hand into the abyss and yanks out one of the most legendary and feared relics in the entire kingdom. Introducing the Star Ring Sword, a bizarre spring-loaded weapon forged from hyperflexible alloy, whipping and contorting through the air like a living mechanical serpent. A quick flashback hits Van. Back in his past life, this exact nightmare of a weapon was infamous as the Massacre Sword Blood Chain Prelate. Karina glares at him, eyes burning with absolute murderous intent, vowing to show him the agonizing sacrifices she made, just to claim her throne at the top. And honestly, this is the exact adrenaline rush Van has been craving. If he is so desperate to taste her ultimate power, she is more than happy to serve it up. She gives him one final warning. If this next move totally destroys him, he has nobody to blame but himself. And with that, all hell breaks loose. A cataclysmic shockwave of mana explodes from the coffin, unleashing a raging cyclone of jagged steel. The metallic hurricane violently orbits her body. Ralph and Falk are completely frozen, their jaws practically hitting the floor as they try to process the absolute insanity before them. They desperately try to categorize it as just another sword style, but the reality is way more insane. Helene steps in, dropping the lore. She reveals that this is not just swordplay. It is a classified national magic art circle named Requiem. It is a mythical endgame ability that only a super rare fraction of the Lutia bloodline can ever unlock through pure magical mastery. The spell basically maxes out the sword's elasticity, launching the tip at literal supersonic speeds. Van just stands there, casually watching the death storm multiply in front of him. The chaotic vortex looks like an infinite hypnotic dance of spinning lances entirely surrounding the arena. Karina officially dubs this apocalyptic move the Dance of Circle Spears. She coldly states that nothing survives in her domain. Whether it is blazing fire, raw lightning, or human flesh, everything gets shredded into confetti once the blades drop. And the worst part, the kill zone is rapidly expanding to swallow the entire Colosseum. She arrogantly offers him an out. If he is terrified, he can just forfeit and run for his life. She is feeling generous enough to let him walk. But if he foolishly decides to stay, he will be completely erased. Not even a single bone fragment will survive the grinder. Van soaks in her entire villain's speech without flinching a single muscle. With ice in his veins, he tells her to save her breath on expanding the storm, because he is bringing the fight straight to her. He shuts his eyes for a fraction of a second. When they snap back open, everything shifts. The hyperspeed cyclone is fast, but it is not completely flawless. Faint glowing streaks of motion ripple through the chaos, painting a clear trajectory of every single blade. Right then and there, he triggers a hidden state known as tachypsychia. It is an absolutely wild phenomenon, where the human brain shifts into overdrive, cranking its processing speed to godly levels when faced with imminent death. It's a freakish survival instinct, a glitch in human biology that pinpoints the exact route to stay alive when your brain is drowning in sensory overload. Most people might tap into it once in a lifetime purely by accident, but he's hacked the system. He can flip that switch whenever he damn well pleases. Riding that hyper-focused high, he walks straight into the eye of her blade tornado. And just like instead he weaves through the lethal metal hurricane like it's nothing. Simon watches completely floored by how effortlessly Van swats away the death blows. Even the prince leans in totally baffled, but absolutely mesmerized by the spectacle. The truth is Van has already decoded her crazy weapon. With a whip sword, the center of gravity is permanently locked at the very tip of the blade, meaning every single ounce of that devastating attack relies on one tiny focal point. Snap the tip and the entire technique crumbles. Karina glares at him, absolutely speechless, finally spitting out that he's an absolute monster. Van just shrugs it off. He tells her it has zero to do with being a monster. He simply grinds harder than everyone else, exactly like she does. That completely throws her off. Her blood starts boiling all over again as Van keeps pushing her buttons. He drops a harsh truth: a whip sword chooses its master. Any rookie trying to swing that thing would just end up slicing themselves to ribbons. Just having fancy swordsman genetics isn't nearly enough to tame a beast like that. Then he hits her with the ultimate question: how many brutal years did you sacrifice just to master that one blade? Karina completely freezes up. She hasn't actually stopped to process that in years. Suddenly, she's ripped right back into a dusty, faded memory from her childhood. She flashes back to the one time her dad showed her how to grip a hilt. For him, it was probably just a random passing thought. But for her, it meant everything. It was the first time she actually felt a real connection. For one split second, she thought she finally felt her dad's love. Too bad that fleeting moment never happened again. Her father got swallowed up by noble politics and completely tossed his illegitimate daughter to the sidelines. He had his real family to protect after all. That's when a young Karina made a vow. She was going to forge herself into an unstoppable weapon. She convinced herself that if she climbed to the absolute top, then maybe, just maybe, her dad would actually look at her as a true daughter. From that day on, her training became an obsession. Day in and day out, she bled and sweat without a single break. The agonizing grind slowly twisted her into an absolute terror on the battlefield. It all peaked when she completely humiliated her golden boy half-brother in front of a massive crowd. But after snagging that win, the mocking whispers finally stopped. But the trade-off: she began drowning in toxic jealousy and paranoid glares from everyone around her. Even her own flesh and blood, her father started looking at her like she was a ticking time bomb. Any scrap of pity he used to have just evaporated. Sure, he officially stamped her name on the family tree as a legitimate heir, despite her being the mistress's kid. But owning up to her massive so, playing it safe for his precious household, he completely turned his back on her and walked away. That was the exact moment it clicked for Karina. The only thing she actually owned in this world was the cold steel in her hands. From then on, she made herself an undeniable force of nature. She swore to crush everyone with such raw power that they'd never even get the chance to toss her aside again. In her mind, carving a bloody path to the top was the sole way to force her family to finally respect her. Snapping right back to the arena, Karina screams at Van, demanding to know what the hell he could possibly understand about her pain. Pure blind rage propels her forward. She blitzes him. The deadly dancing steel manages to nick him, leaving streaks of red across his skin. But something's off. Her lightning-fast strikes are suddenly dragging, getting stiff and sloppy. Van instantly spots the massive blind spots opening up in her defense. Instead of backing off, he doubles down, rushing straight into the danger zone to close the gap. Karina's brain practically short-circuits. She is completely mind-blown. Why the hell is he charging her when literally every other fighter runs screaming from her range? She just can't process it. Why is this totally magicless guy refusing to give up a single inch of ground?